My name is David Duarte, the Youth Nation President. The conception of Youth Nation began in 2015. At the time I was a youth advocate, having completed school about 4 years ago, 4 years prior. And we thought that it was time to consolidate the youth in this country. We have different youth programs, which we found and realized that they were all duplicating roles. You find like the case of youth council, the youth commission, and other like-minded youth programs which were working by themselves. So there was need for consolidation of these youth programs into one place where they can have a conversation. And that is the role and that is the place where Youth Nation presented itself.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you one simple question. There must have been a reason and there must have been motivations to set up Youth Nation. So I'd like you to share us with information about the same, and also I'd like to know what have been the key strategic objectives, or rather you can share with us some of the programs of the Youth Nation.
Yes, the first thing that comes into the mind of a young person is information. And as I've said, it is the place of being misled or lack of information that propelled us to come up with now a unit called Youth Nation. The main objective was to highlight the main key things, the main gaps that face the young people. One of these gaps was, of course, the bureaucratic engagements while engaging with young people. As we know in this country, for a young person to find the right information, it becomes a challenge. And that is the reason that propelled us to think now there was a great need to bring the young people in one block at a center of information. And now, as Youth Nation, the main goal for us is, first of all, to empower the young people. The young people can only be empowered once they know that their interests have already been catered for. So as Youth Nation, we felt that the time was right, 7 years ago. Before the 2017 election, we thought that to get into this election, which was 2017, we needed to craft ourselves out of the bureaucratic disadvantages which we were facing in accessing information, and not only information, opportunities within the government. So Youth Nation came and was able now to bring quite a consolidated order. That is to mean we have been the forefront to propagate for consolidation of the affirmative funds such as Youth Fund, Uwezo Fund, Digital and Sports Fund, which we all know that when they are administratively duplicated in terms of the role and the costing, it is becoming very, very expensive for that same fund to be issued to the young person. And those are the things that we've been working on. Apart from that, we have also been keen to ensure that also the youth economic empowerment opportunities that comes with the AGPO tenders are also able to impact the life of the young person.
Mm-hmm. So does that answer the question, some of the strategies that you've put in place or some of the programs that you're running at Youth Nation?
Well, I'll be specific on the strategy because our strategic engagement also has a direct impact to the young person. So the first strategy is, of course, innovation. Innovation in this sense. A lot of the young people who are out there are technologically connected. That is to mean when we are talking about the affirmative funds, we are on the forefront that for us to impact the life of the young people, we must also come and restructure the part of disbursement of the affirmative fund. Now, as we are speaking, we have a bill for the consolidation of the affirmative fund. That is the youth fund, Uwezo Fund, the Women Enterprise Fund, the Sports and Digital Fund, into one basket. so that we are able to build efficiency. But it does not stop there. We must ensure that once the collapsed or the consolidated fund is in place, it must also be executed and disbursed through a technological driven strategy. That is to mean we must ensure that we have a Kenyan Youth Trust Bank. Now, that is one of the strategy, and that strategy is direct to the economic empowerment of the young person. The other strategy is also the youth economic empowerment opportunities, which means the young person must know and understand that there are opportunities that belong to the young people in this country, both in the county government and the national government. And for them to get that information, we must systemize and bring and adopt technology. That is what we have been working on. Like now, the technology that we've been working on called Pesakazi. It is to bring about efficiency and bring effectiveness of that empowerment opportunity for the young person. So that is part of the strategy. And the final strategy is the political engagement. You know, we cannot stop and execute a program outside the political sphere of this country. We must ensure that the political engagements, and especially the young people who are out there, they need to know that we cannot work without politics. So we must also implement that political engagement, and that dialogue is about to get intensive right about this year as we get to the general election.
Well, I like that, and I'd like to know what kind of impact you've had on the Kenyan youth as Youth Nation, and what have been some of the challenges that have hampered your activities, and of course the programs that you've actually talked about, because there's the technological side of it, but there's also the economic side that really affects the young people and how they receive you.
Yes.
There's maybe language barrier at times, maybe when you're trying to reach out to guys in the northern part of Kenya. Sometimes it's even in the myths that people already have, the deceptions that we have, because there's the political effect of how we consume information. So those could be some of the challenges that have hampered your activities and programs, but I'd also like to know what's the impact like.
Well, first of all, we are coming at a place where we have been working in serious restructuring. The legislative and the policy element of impacting the young people, I think we have had a short end of the stick. That is to mean a lot of what we've been advocating for has not received the glorious legislative support. However, the administrative support has been there. One of the impacts that we've been able to have as Youth Nation is, of course, bridging and taking away the barriers, the bureaucratic barriers. You know, one of the things that really affect the life of a young person is the moment he gets to a place and he finds a roadblock. Now, Youth Nation, we have come with solutions that have been able to take those barriers. One of them is this. At the time when we were beginning, the youth docket itself was in the Ministry of Youth, of Public Service, Youth and Gender. So that in itself was a displacement of the efficiency or effectiveness of the docket in itself. So we were able to request that we be transferred to the Ministry of Innovation, ICT and Youth. However, we are coming at a place where we are thinking that youth department and the docket should not become a department in any ministry. It should be a fully fledged ministry, so that the departments of ICT and innovation, the Department of Sports, Culture and Heritage, those ones can come below. You know, you cannot have effective impact if you are duplicating duties. I don't see the need for us to have two ministers championing for youth issues. There's no need for us to have the Ministry of Sports and also have the Ministry of Youth under Innovation and ICT. We are supposed to have it the other way around. We are supposed to have a fully fledged Ministry of Youth, just like Treasury. When you go to Treasury, it is a department that deals with other multi-departments. But these are systematic government agencies that are working in coordination and liaison with the Ministry of Treasury. Now, we need to come back and bring about now the change that is so much desired. Because that impact that you're asking about would have been more impactful if we had the youth ministry under one house, so that it can take the departments of ICT, innovation, sports, and all the creative and all that. However, all is not lost. What we know is we have experienced a lot of challenges, which we have graciously crossed over. The first challenge that we experienced so much was the legislative, the political legislative barricade. Because when we talk about youth empowerment in this nation, we are seen like we are looking for favors. We are not looking at favors. When we look at young people being the consolidated constituent into the next election, we have what it takes to demand for more, especially on the legislation.
Okay, so I'd like to know, do we have avenues to lobby? Because it seems like there's no representation. I know Youth Nation is one of the arms that's actually pushing for more of a lobbying group,
Yes,
or lobbyist group. But are we being lobbied enough? And where do the funds go as soon as the lobbying is done? Because I know of so many other wings and arms that have been given money for the youth, but it doesn't do youthful work.
yes. Well, as an organization, and coming from the semi-autonomous angle, in terms of our administration, the first thing that is there is to understand where the problem is. I think the young people don't know where the problem is, and that is why we're here, to educate and to ensure that they have the right information. The first thing that we need to understand as young people, for us to lobby and become effectively competitive in the political space, because legislation is a key component in governance and administration. We must come to a place where we realize and consolidate our struggles and our challenges. That's where we are missing it. Now, I will give you a good example of what is happening in this upcoming election. Analytically, and from a very, very accurate analysis, 70% of the young people in this country are below 35 years. Out of that 70%, we have a representation of about 29% of that population. Remember, and this is something that people need to understand. When you talk about a youthful nation, you're not talking about young people alone. You're talking about the generation below the year of 35%. So when we look at the young people who are below 35 years and are able to vote, are between 13.8 million and 14 million. Now, we are losing it out because out of these 13.8 million young people who are eligible to vote, we only have 7.5 to 8 million people who are registered voters. Now, that is a call for concern. Why? Because they are just a slight representation of 54% of the population that is supposed to be voting. Now, you cannot talk about political lobbying, you cannot talk about legislative impact if there is no consolidation and there is no participation of all the stakeholders of young people who are supposed to be out there and registered as voters. So as Youth Nation, we are starting that lobbying from that. The deficit. This deficit that we are talking about 13.8 million young people who are supposed to be registered voters, and only 54% who are actually 7.5 to 8.3 million are the only registered voters. Of what impacts do they have in legislation? So we should not even discuss lobbying when we have not addressed that. The second thing is this: out of these registered voters, the 7.5 million to 8.3 million young people who are registered voters, 5 million are listed in CRB. And they are listed in CRB because of consumer and character loans. So we have 3/4, 67% of those who are registered voters again as listed young people. Now, that cannot propel us as a nation towards an economic liberation as young people. So we need to now come back and administer the lobby from the shorthand of our disadvantage, which is young people who are already listed and don't see any reason why they should go out and register as voters and as voters, leave alone voting in the whole exercise of election.
Okay, this one because you want to jump straight into the economic empowerment, I'd like to know what's the projection like for Youth Nation in the next 5 years. Where do you see Youth Nation in the next 5 years?
First, in the next 5 years, I envisage a nation of young people who will be first informed. Information is not power when it is not transmitted through the implementation of what is known. That's the difference. The second thing is this: in the next 5 years, we will have implemented as Youth Nation tangible solutions towards addressing the economic injustices in this country for the young people. Time is up for this to say that enough is enough on the economic oppression and suppression by the system and the bureaucracies that are in place even now. Now, that is to mean in the next 5 years we should be having a consolidated affirmative fund that is running independently on its own as a youth trust bank for the youth. The next 5 years, we will have got millions of young people adequately empowered economically and financially, but more so, we will have engaged them also in financial literacy. What we lack, and that's why most of the young people are being listed, is because we don't have financial literacy. Like a young person will think, if I'm listed, it is to the detriment of the person who lists me. That is where they miss it out. But they forget that being listed not only takes down your credit score for credit, it also puts you at a place of disadvantage for the next 7 years. So if you are 20 years and you're listed, you will recover when you're 28 years. So that time that is being robbed to the young people in the next 5 years, it's something that will have done away with it.
Let's move into the economic front. Economic empowerment is a term that's most popular, especially when it comes to these donor patterns. You're aware of that.
Yes,
and they've already shifted. And this word economic empowerment has been the money maker of so many things, okay? But what do you think about what are some of the challenges that the Kenyan youth are facing? Because economic empowerment is the money maker, but the young people are facing a challenge in actually even making either the money or even just building avenues to score this empowerment.
Well, when we look at economic empowerment, in my perspective and in my own personal view, it is not a word. It is an act. It is tangible. When somebody says you are empowered, it means there is something that you can draw out of it. However, that has not been the case because it has been politicized. It has been used as a hook and bait to entice the young person. Now, when we are looking at economic empowerment, we have to look at the how and the what that we are talking as an empowerment. Now, the how bit is a very serious bit. If I tell you I'm going to empower you, I must show the practical way of empowering you. That is not the case that has happened to the millions of young people. They are told about economic empowerment. And that's why, as Youth Nation, we've been advocating for economic empowerment and the transformation agenda. Because we believe the first thing that the young person needs is the right information. What that young person does with the information will either empower the young person or disempower the young person. That is to mean, if I tell you that there is an opportunity and you take on my word as the youth leader, and I tell you the opportunity is in that place, place X, and you use that information only to realize there was no that opportunity, then it becomes a disadvantage. Now, we must revisit and redefine what economic empowerment is. To our youth, economic empowerment first is the security of the future, is the access to opportunities and resources. It is the access to employment. It is the access to self-empowerment. Now, you cannot empower young people who are disadvantaged, and that empowerment, again, is also tagged to the CRB. Because when that young person is coming and what he says that there's an opportunity, only to go there and realize that he's already listed. So the first empowerment that comes into perspective is delisting the young people. Delisting the young people. The 5 million registered voters must be delisted first. They must be given a new, fresh beginning in their life. Why? Because we cannot advance as a nation when we have millions of young people who are dependent. You know, the problem with our economic empowerment model is perceived to come from consumer and not production. So we have many young people who are actually consumers but not producers. But they have the energy, they have the skills. Others have serious innovations. Others are thinkers. And if we are not careful, we will not empower those young people. So my view of economic empowerment, first of all, is to cut the chain, to cut loose that chain in CRB.
So we brag that we are the pool of energy. We are the vast pool of energy as young people. We can brag about that.
Yes.
But we are the most affected by unemployment and joblessness. Why do you think that is the case?
Well, the reason is simple.
No, you have to paraphrase.
Yes.
So that people get to know. Yeah.
The reason is simple, and this is the reason. The young people are the majority disorganized populace being led by the minority organized populace. This is what I mean. The politicians know that because of our disadvantage, they can twist us because we are not organized. And that is what the Youth Nation is bringing to the table. That we should not just brag about our energy. We should be talking about our energy being the thing that takes us to the table. You know, one of the key things that I've realized, and probably I've heard it out there, somebody was asking, are the youth on the table or the menu? That's a very serious question. But the real answer is not on the table or the menu. It's on the recipe. What kind of real youths are we bringing up to the society? We must take up our role. We must stop being the recipe. We must stop being the utility that is used in the kitchen when people are discussing leadership. We have a role as young people to bring the change. And we can only bring the change when we consolidate. How do we consolidate? First of all, by understanding our challenges and our struggles. Now, if the CRB thinks does not consolidate the young people, and we are talking about masses, millions of young people, what else will consolidate the young people? We must use this disadvantage to our advantage, that we bring and place a call on the leadership that we are in this place because of also certain setbacks. Some are of our own making, some are systematic. So we have to come at a place whereby we use our energy in a positive way. Government sometimes, by the way, will only listen when young people are able to show that they are not only having the numbers, but they are also having the minds. And that's what we are presenting as the youth nation.
That's pretty brilliant. I'd like to know, how does the Kenyan youth contribute to the growth of the country's economy? Because maybe you're not contributing anything at all, because the people with the money look like they are contributing a lot, but what are the Kenyan youth contributing to the growth of the country's economy?
You know, the Kenyan economy is driven by the young people. The hawker hawking in the streets is a young person. The tout at the bus stops and helping us with our public service is a young person. The vendors are the young people. The Juakali sector is the young people. Mark you, we have another industry called Boda Boda that has a constituent of about 2 million young people. Now, these are the drivers of the economy. Because when you look at the dynamics of economy, it is not the one person who spends 1 million that counts. It is the millions who spend 10 shillings that counts. Because out of the million people, 10 million is in circulation. As opposed to one person with 1 million shilling with only 1 million in circulation. So the youths are the drivers of the economy. When you go down to the village, when you go down to the streets, you will find and realize that the youth are the ones who are driving different sectors in the economy. Now, the question is this: how segmented, how practical are our economic models? Are they sustainable? Are they viable to drive the youth economic enterprise? Or are they only driving and thriving the big businesses? And I'll give you a good idea. One of the key things that propels and generates the hawking industry, it's because one person is able to import things from outside and give several people to go and now sell. Now, when a lot of the young people are in that bracket, then it means their only input in the economy is the input output, whereby I am selling, get a commission, get something, and then afterward, when I'm going home, I start consuming, I start spending. Because when you're going home after hawking, when you're going home after your business, you don't have your own car, so you will go and commute. When you commute, that is consumption. When you get to the kiosk, to the shop, to the mall, you are buying. So that consumer expenditure is what is discouraging the economic growth and participation by the young people.
So that's the role of the young people, and that's how they can contribute to the economy. But making sure that these young people improve their economic status, or rather enhancing the Kenyan youth economic status, because we don't, okay, personally I feel like we can't improve something that does not exist.
Exactly.
It's there. We run some of the economies, some of the industries you've said, but we are running out of goodwill, out of survival actually. So it's a survival tactic. It's not something that I'm deliberately doing because I know that I can add on to my next project. So what can the government do to ease out the pressure on this young person?
The first things first, and I'm repeating this, the government should find in its place of governance and administrative role right now. We are not talking about later. To see the need first to delist the millions of young people. That's where it starts. Because now, by doing that, you will be giving the young person an upper hand on where to start. The second thing the government needs to do is to ensure that the funds and resources that belong to the young people are accessible by doing away with bureaucracies, putting the systems, the structures that we're talking about. When we're talking about Pesa Kazi, is to mean that we are connecting the young person with information, and also not only the information, the provision. Now, in my view, what the government now has done is just but a step. And we must appreciate that a lot has also been done. Not all of it, but more needs to be done to ensure that a young person who is in business, who is talented, who is innovative, can have very, very easy access to capital. My Secretary General was on record talking about the capital injection to the youthful business. And it's very practical, because when you are not able to get the capital, then even a good idea does not materialize. It doesn't even have time for incubation, leave alone to get it to the market. So what the government needs to do, first of all, is to expand the financial space and opportunity for the young people. The second thing the government needs to do, it needs now to put a lot of resources in young people. We cannot be talking about youth funds and affirmative funds that are less than 50 billion in a place where we have a population, a youthful population that is between 10 to 15 million. We need that to be expanded. We need like 100 billion to begin with, as goodwill. That is where we start. So that the young people, when they know that they are able to access these opportunities, these funds, they are sure that they are going to do that. And the last thing, we need to have a Kenya Youth Trust Bank. We need a youth trust bank, so that monies that belong to the young people are dispensed and disbursed through a competitive and a very attractive disbursement framework that they own as young people.
I really enjoy that, but I'd like to do comparisons, and it's more generational. Previously, we'd see so many people independent at an early age. Right now, most people are turning into beggars and incapable of maybe even taking care of themselves. And I gave an earlier simple example of Tuma Fair, which was not a culture. Our mothers would definitely go for dates with our fathers without any, unajua hakuna fare ilikuwa inakuliwa.
Very true.
And that's why maybe even emotionally we are scarred, and the emotions reflect on how we spend our cash and how we economically invest in things. Would you give me a breath on what really went wrong in terms of the generations and how the survival tactics have pretty much changed?
This is what happened. Initially, we were a producing country. I like to use a good example. There's a time we had Nyayo bus and Nyayo cars. At some point in time, we were assembling cars in this country. It was in the 90s, we were still kids ourselves. But that in itself was propelling manufacturing and assembling. At some time back, agriculture was serious. And farmers used to have a lot of money. That's the generation where we come from. But there's something that went wrong. That our parents focused so much on educating us, giving us the right education, and also denying us the exposure of the reality in their time. Now, when you bridge the two, it means you can have a graduate fresh from college with a first-class honors degree, and when you tell him, what do you want to do with your life, that person will tell you he's still looking for a job. Now, the person with the solutions is looking for a job. So the main job of a young person is to look for a job. So if that is not mitigated, then where we are, the Tuma Fair, and you know, there's Tuma Fair and there's the Sherehe Friday. Like today, Fridays, you know, when I look at the young people spending money, sometimes I wonder because what is of priority goes to the back, and what is not a priority comes to the front. So we have to breach that mindset, the mindset that we are just consumers. When you are a consumer, you are not a producer, and you don't become you don't become rich by consumption. You become wealthy by producing.
I love what you've just actually said because it's something that I've lived with, and I said it on my radio show, where we take our children to them. We take our children to the mall. We don't take them to factories, so they don't know how to produce. They actually are. Dad didn't buy a lollipop. They don't say, Dad neza uza hii watch nipate profits like the Indians do. So it seems like it's actually an Afro thing to not to know how to produce. So what's the role of Youth Nation in ensuring that economic empowerment of the Kenyan people is actually put at the forefront? Because you of course there is the representation of it, there is how you've been changing policy and everything, but I'd like to get it from your breath. What has Youth Nation done to ensure that economic empowerment of the young people is at the forefront?
Well, the first thing that we need to understand and also remember is that at the place of information, and I always like to mention that information is nothing until it is implemented. If I tell you you are going to succeed and you don't believe that you're going to succeed, no matter how long I tell you you will succeed, you won't. So our role has been, first of all, to reinforce that message that a youth can be economically be empowered, a youth can succeed in this country, and a youth can become something. But now, when we are saying that, it is like a doctor giving you prescription and tell you go home and take these dose. One in the morning, another one in the afternoon and the evening. And then what do? You go and put the prescription in the drawer, and you don't do what? You don't use that medicine. You will not heal. Now, that is what Youth Nation is doing. We are stopping the bleeding. You know, the first thing that you do when you find somebody bleeding, you don't start telling the person, we are going to take you to the hospital. Oh, we'll take you to Nairobi hospital. Oh, we are going. You first stop the bleeding. You save the life. So the Youth Nation is there to stop first the bleeding. The other thing the Youth Nation is doing is to ensure those who have been bleeding with silent wounds, silent scars, get their healing. Now, we are bleeding socially, politically, and economically. A young person right now is not even sure, not about the meal, but even about the next minute. Because when we are looking at the politicians, and that's what young people tend to think. They think that by following a certain politician, they will succeed. No, they are building the success and the career of that politician. Where are they? So, Youth Nation, we must, and we are there to, first of all, ask for accountability. We are asking for politicians who have been given leadership role to account, to give us the receipts, so that we might respect them and probably elect them. So that is where we are as Youth Nation.
Okay, for the two questions, I'd like us to be precise so that we do our break. And I'd like to just know, how does Youth Nation contribute to solving the youth unemployment problem? Because your SecGen has said a couple of things. What have you done correctly to make sure that this unemployment problem is a thing of the past? And what are some of the measures that you put in place? And of course, I'd like to know, what is the place of politics in the youth economic empowerment? Because it affects how we breathe. It affects how we sneeze. It affects how we consume and how we produce. So just give me a breath on, how does Youth Nation contribute to solving the unemployment problem, especially amongst the youth, and what is the place of politics in the youth economic empowerment?
Very good. First of all, with the youth unemployment, the first thing that we have done is to re-engage on the policy setup. And I'm coming to that because we had two bills. We had the Youth Employment Bill Act of 2015, very good bill, which was promoted and sponsored by then Honorable Sakaja. And the implementation of it required that we have also a Kenya Youth Employment Authority. Now, we are not saying that the policies are not there, but the reinforcement of the implementation. That policing and implementation of that policy is what the Youth Nation is more keen about. Because if everyone followed the law, if every law that has been put into place to empower and enhance the life of a young person was adequately implemented and supervised, then we'll not be having the issue of unemployment. But again, the other thing comes into the classification of employment opportunities. We have graduates, okay? We have freshers who have just graduated. Are we absorbing them to internship? Are we exposing them to the job market? That has not been happening. So we have been able to take away what was the popular requirement that for you to get a job, you need to have 5 years experience, you need to have worked and all that. That one we have done away with. The other thing that we have done away with for the young people is to ensure that when a young person is looking for a job, you are not first of all asked for certificate for clearance of CRB, tax compliance. You are told again, go to DCI, come with a good conduct. Those are things, and I appreciate the youthful leaders who have been able to work with us and ensure that these things have been done. So, getting back to the youth and the political, economic engagement, that is where the whole ball starts and stops. We must be adequately informed on our role as young people in as far as electing the right leaders. You cannot expect full implementation without good and pure legislative supervision. That is where we believe that as Youth Nation, there is a conduit that allows the currents that we want empowerment, and now we are losing it because the legislation itself is not supervised or there is no political goodwill. So as Youth Nation, we are bringing that, but we cannot bring it just as an organization. This is not our vision. It is a vision for the young people. And even into this election, no matter any way that the young person will vote, it is the majority of young people who will be going to the ballot to elect the leaders. So we are sitting in a place where we are saying young people must take responsibility, political responsibility, not just as an electorate, but also as representatives of other young people, as the Secretary General has said. They need to present themselves for this role for leadership, and they have to do it in this election. We cannot change if we are not ready to change ourselves.
So youth and elections, one of the most sensitive topics across the world, because this is the youngest the world has ever been. Not leave alone Kenya, the rest of the world, this is the youngest we've ever been. And so many young people are affected by how politics is conducted and the aftermath. I think we should also point out the violence that goes on and our participation in it. So what are the threats to the youth during elections? I know I'd like you to cover policy, politics, elections, and the violence in it. And then what role do you think the youth should play in politics and elections?
Very good, thank you. The first threat to youth in elections is incitement. Because it is a threat because it is propagated because of a deficiency of disempowerment. So it all boils back to lack of empowerment, lack of information. So what happens is the perpetrators of incitement in any level, they have a catalyst. So they will come to the youth with ideas and ideologies that seem to superimpose or reinforce their rhetoric. And that is why you find that when youths are incited and paid tokens, they're very quick to get to that. Now, the threat to any nation, and especially in Africa and this country, is when the youth are misused and abused in that process. They end up again to derail the development, previous or even better known, the proposed development for the nation. In which way? The first thing is there is likely event of post-election violence. And that is perpetuated because of that lack of empowerment. So young people are able to, can receive even as little as 50 shillings to go and cause mayhem. So those are serious threats, and not only to the nation, but also to the economy. And you'll find that, like the past elections, whenever we are out of an election, we waste a whole 1 year again trying to settle down, because we have issues of anxiety in the country because of just an election, which has, at the time, is already done. Now, if we are not careful as a nation and we allow that, it means again every term of any elective government will be 4 terms. 1 term disappears because of those commotions. Now, when we look at it now on the policy aspect, and because policy also come into place because the youth understand their place in government, in ensuring elections are done and conducted. If the youth are not peaceful, you cannot sell your manifesto to begin with. So we end up losing again the right leaders because the elective exercise is very expensive in terms of time, mobilization, and all that. So we are looking critically into ensuring that young people, first of all, are not misused. They are not misused because it doesn't pay anyway. And even for a young person who is going out to be used, they must understand, when you take the bullet, you will have had invited the politicians to come and do their politics in your funeral. So usikuwe ni wewe ni kijana wa kuita watu mkutano because ulikufa. And you know, right now as we are getting to campaigns, there are 2 functions that are very important. I've never seen a politician going to weddings. Have you? They don't go to weddings. They go to churches and funerals. So that is a serious setback to the youth.
So what role do you think the youth should play in politics?
Well, the role is quite expansive. The first role is to ensure that you are a registered voter. We have discussed before, CRB itself alone should propel and motivate you to get yourself out of this situation. The second thing is, as a registered voter, you have 2 roles. Either to elect or present yourself for election, for elective office. Why? Because we need young people to present themselves for these positions, and especially at the grassroots. You know, we should have 70% of the MCAs across this nation to be below 35 years. Why? We have the numbers. And we know what our ails at uko mitaani. The other thing is, when we are presenting ourselves for leadership and elective roles, we must understand we are coming on the basis of ideologies and ideals and the vision that the young person has. Young people have the mind. What they lack is the resources. But if we are able to consolidate ourselves from a place of our disadvantage and make it now our organizational advantage to ensure that we elect young people who have the right mind and who are sober, and then ensure that they are accountable to us as young people. That is the next thing that we need to do as young people.
So I'd like to know what has hampered youth participation in politics and elections, because maybe I have an interest, but when I think of it, I am not a beneficiary. There is the myths around elections and the system and who elects who. There is this phrase that goes, even if I vote, they already know who, they've already decided who the president is. I've heard of a phrase, uh, the president is not elected, he's selected. So such phrases are things that young people live with, and it pretty much is traumatic to us even thinking about our involvement in politics. So what has hampered youth participation in politics and elections?
That is the most, what I can call, it is the most discouraging perception. I'm not saying it is the reality, because we cannot authenticate. When a young person perceives or believes the propaganda that some are selected and others are elected or not elected, then that's where the problem is. Now, either way, it is the civic and democratic right of every young person who understands his own plight to take a flight from the current situation that we have. You know, what has hampered the young people is we have old scars in our expectations from previous elections, scars that we were meant to believe will be coming to another election empowered. Then we realize that the only thing that these people did, who promised those things, have changed the governments. Now they come in new vehicles in terms of political parties and all that. And that, if you look at this next election, 3/4 of the people who went for elective office are no longer in the vehicle that they had before as they came to look for the election. However, we cannot substitute our hope and expectation because of the past failure. What we need to do is to reinforce and demand for authoritative and right leadership by electing the right leaders. If somebody selects someone, there is the part of accountability. And in this, one of the key things that we've been able to do, and we have been able to witness in our legal and in our legal system and the framework, is the fact that we have reinforced. Right now, it will be very important, even as we go to the next election. I can sit here and say we are looking at a very, very competitive election. And I can tell you, as my fellow young person, don't fight for a politician. We might have even a rerun. It is there. The indicators are there. What we need to do is consolidate our numbers. At the point of our disadvantage, as I've told you before, the issue of CRB itself should motivate you, because we can use that to now bring and consolidate our vote so that we can use it to negotiate for the direction of the leadership we want. Finally, on the issue of policy, we are highly displaced as young people because of implementation. Why? Because when we talk about policy formulation and implementation, those are two things. The youth are not involved in the formulation, and the youth are not involved in the implementation. So we need to critically think about our next move as far as elections are concerned. We are supposed to, first of all, vote wisely and ensure that there is peace after the elections, but more so, we need to ensure we have the right leader. You know, you will only be a representation and reflection of the leader you vote for. That is how it is.
I like how you've actually phrased that, because even as a young person, I've always known the people I like to choose, but when it comes to the elections, I don't know what changes my mind last minute, and you might find yourself going to vote for the same person that failed you before. So it's something that we can actually look at. So why are youths the determinant of who wins the election, but the most excluded in the sharing of the spoils? So we determine who's going to become president, but when it comes to the sharing of the spoils, or rather sharing of the cake, then we're not on the table. The other question is, why are youths not considered as stakeholders in political discussion, even when we are the ones who are depended on when it comes to the winning of the elections? So I'd like to just hear that from you, so you can combine the two.
Yes. upcoming the general election from an analytic perspective is between the current generation and the next generation, and this is why. The representation of young people into the next general election is coming short under 3.8 million who are potential voters against the 7.5 to 8.3 million registered voters. What needs to be done is ensuring that these young people who have not registered to vote, first of all, they come on board. That process is ongoing. They need to we need young people to get their votes out so that we can answer the second question, the question of why are we used for elections. We are good participators into electing people, but we are shortchanged when it is at the time of who gets what and who gets where. The first thing that we know and we need to understand is this: the millions of young people are stakeholders. So when we are looking at elections, we must use our consolidated numbers. We're not talking about the 7.5. I am telling the young people, we need the total 13 million because we are short under the 11 million those votes of those who are above 35 years old. Now, having said that, we need to use that consolidated block to ensure that we demand for serious representation in government administration and legislation. That is to mean we need to have many young people appointed for administrative and administrative roles in government and governance, both at the national government and and also at the county government. The other thing is this: we are supposed to be the ones who are movers and shakers of this next election, not just as voters. We are supposed to be also in the table as elected leaders, and that is why the more we have young people going and seeking for elective offices, not just for their own interest, not just because they are aligned to sycophancy, but because of ideals and ideologies. You know, we need the things that we've talked about. We need a youth bank. We need a youth trust bank in this country. We need tangible measures, solutions into the implementation. You know, when we forfeit the implementation stage, then we are sure that it will not be done. That is the point.
I like the expression of that. It pretty much reminds me of how the African Americans, even after all these years of asking for repatriation, they've never really formed banks for black people by black people.
Very true.
So they're the only race that do not keep their own money. Their money is pretty much distributed amongst the Jews and the white Caucasians.
Yes.
So it's pretty much exactly what's happening in the country, where the money that belongs to the young people is pretty much distributed to the wealthy, extremely wealthy young, or extremely wealthy old.
Yes.
So that's exactly what's happening. So finally, what is the role of Youth Nation in ensuring active participation of the youth in politics and elections? And of course, what's been your legacy, man? We'd like to know.
Well, that's the drill. Our main role in this upcoming election is to ensure that there is serious inclusive participation into the political atmosphere and the political space in this country. That is to say that we are advocating, we are propagating, we are in support of every young candidate who is presenting himself or herself for elective office. You cannot bypass the fact that we are getting into an election after a pandemic. And this election is very, very interesting election. The first thing that is happening in this election, when we are going out receiving promises of job employments and all that, we must understand also we have a serious issue of lost jobs because of the COVID-19. So we have a role to ensure that we have young people who are representing the interests of young people. As Youth Nation, we have so many things. There's a bill for the Biashara Fund pending in Parliament. It needs to be ascended. It needs to be legislated. And we cannot do it by fence sitting, by being out here. We are supposed to be inside. It's either you are inside the table or outside the table. There's no two ways. You are either part of the plan or you're not in the plan. The issue about the legacy aspect of what we are doing has also been in support of what the President, His Excellency the President, has been able to do for the young people. We must also appreciate, as Youth Nation, we understand we could not effectively work without the conducive environment that His Excellency the President gave us and allowed the young people in this country. We acknowledge a lot of the things that he was able to do before he came into power. There were things that were not done for the young people. We have seen what he has been able to do. Some of them I can mention. Initially, before he came into power, we didn't have digital fund. That was not there. We did not have the sport fund. We did not have the youth employment organization, the KEOPO. We did not even have the internship that is being provided by the public service internship. The other thing is, he brought about Future Bora for the young people. These are things we can see. We have seen Studio Mashinani at every level, at the ground. We have seen his administrative and political goodwill to ensure that the restructuring and consolidation of the affirmative fund has been done. So that is the legacy, but he has not had all that time. So we as Youth Nation, we are presenting and giving the direction of this next election to the young people, that they need to understand you must vote leaders who have tangible solutions into our project, into our problems. And of course, they need to become our partners. That is why the legacy we have as Youth Nation is to ensure that the youth make the right decision and and ensure that they vote the right leadership. That is what the legacy we need as young people.
Finishing statement, man. Encourage us, talk to us. A young person who wants to become a leader like you, a young person who's confused, they don't know who to choose. We're moving towards the election here. Talk to us.
This is so dear to me because I know what the young people go through. I've been here to advocate on their plight. I have ensured that we are trying to do our best as Youth Nation to ensure that the government does its part, and it has done. We've made various changes without too much lobbying, but diplomacy, talking, floating proposals to government. Some have been adopted, some are in the process of being adopted, some were not adopted, and that's part of life. But as a youth and a young person at home, you must understand that we cannot bring about change by refusing to be part and parcel of the process. We are getting to an election, not a selection. Present your vote to elect the right person. And I will insist this, Youth Nation, we believe if the young people, the 5-point-something million young people who are already listed in CRB can be waived, and let it be part of the solution towards liberating and giving a reprieve to a young person who is seeking economic liberation. If we are able to achieve that as Youth Nation, and that's the call we have. Tunataka vijana walio katika CRB kwanza watolewe kwa CRB. Nasi sisi tutahakikisha tunachagua serikali ambayo itatufaidi kama vijana taifa katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. That is my call and that is my plea to the young people.